Live from our nation's capital, it's Deadline DC with Brad Bannon.
Welcome to Deadline DC with Brad Bannon. I'm a national Democratic and progressive strategist, a political analyst for News Radio KNX in Los Angeles, and a weekly columnist for The Hill in Washington, D.C. Mondays on Deadline DC, I talk to the people and players behind the politics and policies that drive our great nation forward, or at least keep it from going backwards during Trump 2.0. Our guest today in the first half hour is Randi Weingarten, who is the president of the American Federation of Teachers and the author of a new book, Why Fascists Fear Teachers. Randi, welcome back to Deadline DC.
Thank you so much for having me, Brad. I really appreciate it. And it's good to be in Washington, D.C. today without seeing the National Guard all over the place.
Yeah, small favors. Let me ask you this question, and I asked this question and I wanted to talk to you today because, as I think I mentioned last time when you were on, my daughter is a public school teacher. And I can't imagine why fascists would fear here for her. So why don't you talk about why do fascists fear teachers? And I'm sure my daughter would love to know.
Well, look, you know, I'm quite careful in my use of the word because I have watched the way, it gets used, basically weaponized in all sorts of different ways. What I tried to do here is describe fascistic behavior in a way that we would if we were teaching a high school or a college, social studies class, fascistic, oligarchical, authoritarian kind of behavior, and really talk about what the antidote is to that. And frankly, just like your daughter, the antidote are teachers. And fascists fear teachers because they basically break through the fear and the division and the demonization and the rage that fascists attempt to create in order to change societies. And what teachers do is teachers try and ensure that kids can think for themselves, can have the skills and knowledge they need for their lives, create a safe and welcoming environment, and create opportunity for all, and have a little bit of power on their own. So we are, and teachers are, the antidote. And I spend a lot of time back from stories from even the Nazi era, but stories to the current day about the amazing work that teachers do.
Since we're here to discuss your book, let's talk about book bans. My daughter is an English teacher, and I look at her book list for her students every year, and I see many of them are banned in some state. Is that part of what you're talking about?
Yes, I mean,
You know,
and it is one of the, what, and this is a spectrum, between the things that start dividing people from each other to real fascistic behavior, like what the Nazis did to Austrian Jews when they made them, you know, um, I'm not even talking about, the concentration camps. I'm talking about when they made them um, uh, lean on sidewalks and streets to clean the streets in their, in their Sunday best or Saturday best. That kind of demonization, that kind of dehumanization, that's what that's that kind of behavior. Now, how does book banning fall in? If you don't want to expose young people or even adults to new ideas, you ban those ideas, you ban those books. Now, there's a big difference between what we actually do in classrooms and what should be in a library. And in classrooms, there's normally curriculum committees that make decisions about the kinds of books that we're going to have that are age appropriate. But in libraries, why would you ban a book and therefore not let any child take that book out of a library, not let any parent have the choice whether that book belongs there? And the books that get banned, I mean, Anne Frank, banning a book about Anne Frank, banning a book about Ruby Bridges, banning a book about Roberto Clemente. Why would you ban these kind of books? It's because you don't want people to actually see other cultures or other people. So I think that there's been a lot said about book banning. There's been a lot of pushback about that because Americans don't want to ban books. That and if
No, they
parents,
don't. Randy,
no,
we got to take a quick break here for our radio audience, but we will continue this interview with Randi Weingarten right after this very quick break. Okay, okay. Okay, we're going to continue with this interview with Randi Weingarten, who is president of the American Federation of Teachers and the author of a great new book, Why Fascists Fear Teachers. Let me ask you this question. One of the you've been outspoken lately in the last few months about Donald Trump's attempt to eliminate the Department of Education. And of course, we are facing budget cuts for educators all across the country. And I hate to mention my daughter again, but she teaches in a central city school. uh, they had a promising teacher they hired last year, a young teacher, who they couldn't hire this year because of funding cuts. First of all, and I'd like to say my first professional job in Washington was as a policy analyst at the Department of Education. Well, I date myself with back then it was the U.S. Office of Education, but I hate to see it dismantled. Is it being dismantled?
yes. And look, we won in the courts below this particular case about dismantling the Department of Education, and the Supreme Court didn't even do a decision. It just did what they called the shadow docket, unsigned decision that basically said that they could go ahead with firings. So let me just take a step back, which is to say everyone can be more efficient. If this was simply about how are we more efficient, how are we more effective, do you need X number of people in a particular department, or can you do something different? I'm all for that. What's happening here is an evisceration and basically firing so many people so that the backlogs for the Office of Civil Rights, which is the one that basically makes sure that if you have a kid with special needs and that kid is not getting serviced in a local district, you can call the Office of Civil Rights and they will try to make that happen for your kid. If you have um, a, a student debt, because the Department of Education deals with all the student debts, if you can't get an answer from your student debt servicer and you're basically about to go into default, there's a backlog of 45 or 60,000 cases. So you're not going to get what the relief you need from the department to deal with that. So these are real people's problems from the layoffs that they've done. But let me say one more thing. The real problem here is they're cutting the services that go directly to kids. Like your daughter teaches in a Title I school. They're going to cut $5 billion of money that goes to kids in these schools. That's tutoring, that's English language proficiency, that's learning how to read, that's after school programs, that's summer school programs, that's class size, that's mental health programs. These are real cuts that hurt kids.
Randy, we're going to have to take that quick break for our radio listeners right now. We'll be back with more of Deadline DC and AFT President Randi Weingarten right after this very quick break. Welcome back to Deadline DC with Brad Bannon. My guest in this half hour is Randi Weingarten, who is the president of the American Federation of Teachers and the author of a great new book, Why Fascists Fear Teachers. There it is, and I think you can see it over my shoulder too. Randi, let me ask you this. One of the classes my daughter teaches is English for immigrants. And because the school has a large immigrant population, and in addition to having to worry about ICE agents crashing her classes, she has to worry about these kind of budget cuts. Why is English language instruction for immigrants so important?
If we want to have an inclusive society, America is the land of immigrants. America has been, since our founding, de Tocqueville talked about how we welcome the immigrant and welcome the stranger. What we need to do if we want to create opportunity for all so that all can compete, we need to help make sure that kids who come from different places can learn English. It is something that is part of opportunity, just like learning to read or learning mathematics. Why would you take that away from kids? That's what public schools are. They are about creating a level playing field for all kids. And past administrations, Republican and Democrat alike, regardless of whether they thought English should be the primary language of America or not, understood that the way in which you help is you create these on ramps so that kids can have the opportunities to get the skills and knowledge they need. Where else are they going to get it if we don't do it in public schools? And there's funding for it that Linda McMahon and Donald Trump and Project 2025 wants to take away.
Okay, let me bring up an unpleasant subject. Last week, young, three children were shot and wounded at a Denver high school, and there was little note of it. There was some national attention, but it got buried in other news. What should we be doing to make schools safer?
Well, let me just say, Brad, I do think it would have gotten more attention, just like the terrible shooting in Minnesota at at the Catholic school during mass when kids were shot and killed. If Charlie Kirk had not been assassinated at in those same few hours. And so let me just say as clearly as I can, I don't really care for this moment what anybody thinks about his positions or not. I personally disagreed with virtually everything he said. Political violence must be condemned always. Just like I believe that all of gun violence, we must find a way to get weapons of war out of people's hands. And we have to do it since gun shootings are the reason, are the most kids get hurt or killed because of gunshots now, not anything else. But let's be clear, what happened last week to Mr. Kirk must be condemned. There is no place in society for political violence in that kind of way or any kind of way. And I think that's what shrouded a lot of the attention in terms of what happened in Colorado. But we have to be serious about gun violence. And frankly, just like we at one point or another had a ban on assault weapons, we should have a ban on weapons of war, except for, police and the military. And I think that there's other things we can do, but that should be first and foremost.
What is the one lesson that you'd like to impart to public school teachers about your book? And I'm sure many of them, including my daughter, will be reading it. What would you like to say to public school teachers now they hear in this opportunity?
Thank you. Public school teachers um, are doing everything they can every single day to help our kids achieve, to help deal with all of the challenges the society throws at kids, from social media and the devices to everything, every other issue, poverty, issues around trauma. And what public school teachers do is they make a difference in the lives of all of our children, and they do it regardless of who our kids are, where they come from, who their parents are, where they live. So this is frankly a love story to teachers and to the teachers and parents who send their kids to public schools, and to the kids who actually need and thrive in public schools, because at the end of the day, that's what teachers do. They help make a difference so kids can thrive.
One final question. What will the American Federation of Teachers be doing to make sure that public education is an issue that gets discussed during the midterm elections?
Well, first, what we're doing is every single Friday on our social media platforms, because the media doesn't really want to talk about the good things that happen in public schools. And every single Friday, we are talking about the good things that happen in public schools. We are lifting up stories of innovation, aspiration, hope, and the things that teachers do all the time. What I would like to see happen is a real discussion of how we help all children, instead of the blame game, instead of ignoring. Our children are our future. We need to help them. They need to be our priority, not tax cuts for the rich, not the kind of not the political machinations of the day, but what we can do to help families thrive, to help create affordability, to help make sure that every single one of our kids has a shot at success. That's what I want.
We have to end the interview on that note. Our guest, Randi Weingarten, president of the American Federation of Teachers and author of a great new book I hope you read, Why Fascists Fear Teachers. There it is. Thank you very much, Randi.
Thank you, Brad.
In the second segment, our guest will be Sarah Hayadusi, who is the executive director of War Win Without War. We'll be back right after these messages for more of Deadline DC with Brad Bannon.